Alright, I just finished location scouting for my new sci-fi movie, The Infected. Now, your location is one of the first ways that your script is going to come to life. It's the setting, it's the backdrop for the entire movie. So let's talk about location scouting. When I go location scouting, I usually have 3 criteria in mind: convenience, layout, and wow factor. Convenience covers a lot of things. First off, is your location convenient to get to? Take your city, your town, wherever you live, and draw a perimeter around it. Say, a 30-minute drive. Everything within that perimeter is going to be convenient to get to. That means that anytime you want to go to that location to plan, to scout, to film, it's never going to be more than 30 minutes away. It's convenient. For instance, with my film, The Infected, there's a bunch of locations that I could check out that are 2 to 3 hours away from my house. But getting to those locations to plan the film is just not feasible. And that's not to mention getting out there to film, etc. Keep the location accessible, convenient to get to. Another aspect of convenience that I like to think about is the distance to the parking lot. Is it a long hike? If you're going to be filming with a lot of gear, is the walk worth it? Is there a more convenient location that you could use that's closer to the parking lot? So that's convenience. The second thing that I think about is layout. I already have the scene in my head and I have the rough blocking in mind. So I take a look at the location and I think to myself, could this scene work in this location? Sometimes there's an immediate red flag, like there's a building in your view or there's a big hole in the ground. Some locations just don't work. But if it looks okay, I start to think about my actors, my sets, my props, my crew in that location. Usually my props and my sets are fairly minimal and they're flexible. But I also need to think about my camera and my crew. For any scene, I need to think about having enough space for my actors to move around in that scene, and I need to be able to double that amount of space to allow my crew to move around. Think of any location as a circle. Half the circle is the stage, and half the circle is the crew. Your location needs to be able to contain the full circle in order to work. For instance, when location scouting for The Infected, I found this great forest for a scene that takes place in a forest clearing. There was definitely enough space to fit my actors, but there were just too many trees in the way for my crew to be able to effectively work around. So that location wouldn't work. Instead, I found a spot just outside the forest with enough space for my crew to move around. With my actors sitting right in front of the trees, I can give the illusion of it being in a forest clearing without actually having to go into the forest. Knowing the scene, I'll be able to work around this, because we never have to flip the camera around to see what's in front of them. So I'll be able to play the whole scene against the trees, no problem. So, knowing the layout of your scene is important. Every time I go to a location, I walk through the scene. I position myself where the camera will be in order to see what will work and what won't. That way I have a good idea of how well the location fits my scene. And finally, there's wow factor. Now, this does not apply to every location, but it's a good thing to keep in mind as you scout for locations. Some locations just need to work. You need a few elements and you can make it happen. But other locations need to be special. They're the backdrops for the film, the places you want people to remember. When I'm location scouting, I'm always looking for that special place, that place that gets me excited. They don't always work out, but sometimes these special locations can inspire new ideas, new ways of thinking about your scenes. For instance, when I was location scouting for The Infected, I needed a scene that took place in a valley. Our characters are looking towards a small, rusted-out spacecraft in the middle of a valley. So, I went and found a location that worked. The layout was perfect. But it was a bit of a hike from the parking lot, and it didn't quite have that wow factor. But that's okay, it worked. So I decided to move on. Then, as I was going back to my car, I found these 2 bridges going over the same valley. I went under them, and they looked epic. Setting a rusted-out spacecraft in between these bridges would give you an image that pops in your memory. It instantly tells you something about the kinds of characters who would scavenge under this bridge. The problem was, the bridge is brand new. In a post-apocalyptic world, you wouldn't have a clean, new-looking bridge structure. So it didn't quite work. But it did get me thinking about bridges. If I could find an old, rusty bridge crossing a valley, it might work better than a wide-open piece of grass. Having the bridge as a backdrop could give this scene a bit more substance. So I kept looking, until I found an old, rusty bridge. It wasn't quite as epic looking as the brand new bridge, but it definitely gives you something to look at. It's got a bit of a wow factor. So, that's what I think about when I go location scouting. convenience, layout, and wow factor. And with those three things in mind, I usually find a location that works for my movies. So, yeah, that's what I have to say about location scouting. Thanks for watching.